Recording in progress.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hope you're all well. Inshallah, let's just give it a few minutes to let everyone join before we get started. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome back to another webinar. I know preparations are probably underway for Hajj. Hopefully, everyone's in the mentality now, getting prepared. Inshallah, I know that your biometrics are getting done, vaccinations are getting done, checklists are being made. And really, that's what these webinars are all here for. Starting from week one, with the theme was You're Here for a Reason. And it really is a blessing. Allah chose you personally to be here, to be on this journey. Out of hundreds of thousands of people, you were chosen. And it's understandable that you want to make the most out of it. And week one is really getting you into the mentality of Hajj. And that leads on to week two. Week two, the theme was more about getting prepared without overthinking. And really, after the mentality has been put in place, then that's where you start thinking, do I do this? Don't I do this? What has to be done? Do I do too much? Do I do too less? And you really don't want to overthink. And week two was really about setting boundaries. So you don't do too much, or you're not doing too less, but you have an idea of what has to be done. And it will help make the journey a lot more smooth. And now, inshallah, we're going into week three. So week three is about starting strong and starting right. So by now, inshallah, the mentality for Hajj is put in place. The boundaries are there. And now we want to learn the basics. And we want to learn the basics of Hajj and Umrah. And really, over, inshallah, this week and the following week, we'll be learning about this. And it really will make your experience when it comes to Hajj and Umrah a lot more comfortable, a lot more easy. And we know with everyone, they want to make sure they're doing everything right. And everyone is a little bit nervous. It's completely understandable. And really, that's what these sessions are here for. So, inshallah, without further ado, I'd like to pass this over to Sheikh Ahsan. And inshallah, he'll take it from you. Sheikh Hassan, take the stage.
جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala, today we are going to do a brief summary and overview of the fiqh of Umrah. And I'm sure that there's probably a good number of you that have performed Umrah before, in which case this will be a revision recap session for you. But at the same time, there are a number of our brothers and sisters who perhaps this is going to be their first time as they make Hajj that they will also perform Umrah. And that was actually quite normal for people. So today it may seem maybe somewhat strange, I don't know, for some people that they haven't performed Umrah before, that they're going to combine their Hajj and Umrah. Their Umrah will be in the same journey as their Hajj. But that actually would have been very normal because previously or historically, many people would have not had the ability, financial or otherwise, to go for Umrah, then return, then go back for a separate Hajj. That would have been extremely difficult financially, also logistically, physically. People have families and other things that were very difficult for them to leave behind. So it was actually very normal for people to go and in a single journey perform both the Umrah and the Hajj. And so if you're in that case, this is going to be your first visit to Mecca, the first time you ever perform Umrah, then inshallah ta'ala, there is nothing to worry about. So really the goal of today is just to give you a basic overview. The detail, inshallah ta'ala, of this we will do again, inshallah, once we're in Saudi Arabia, once we're in Medina, before we actually go to Mecca to perform the Umrah. Inshallah, we will run over this again. And as you know, from now until then, and whilst we're there, inshallah ta'ala, you have plenty of opportunities to ask questions and any concerns that you have. Another thing that I would say is that the fiqh of Umrah is now something which has been, massively made easy in terms of the information accessibility. So the number of lectures and the number of YouTube videos and the number of books and the number of articles that are written on this topic are many. And so therefore, if you feel comfortable with the Hajj guide that you have or an Umrah guide or a tutorial online, the vast majority of this will be the same. There may be some differences here and there just because of the differences between madhabs. If that's the case, you're more than welcome again to ask and just to get that double checked. But as I said, the vast majority, 95%, possibly even more, is exactly the same. So again, there is nothing to worry about. When inshallah ta'ala we go for our Umrah, and Ishaq will correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't memorized every itinerary, but I believe everyone is going to be in Medina, and we're going to be making a Umrah from Medina, and then we will be going to Mecca. And if that is so, then that in some ways makes it easier because we don't have to put on our ihram on an aeroplane or at the airport or anything like that. And in many ways, that also makes things easier. The major component of the Umrah is three things or four things. Four things. Number one is the ihram. Number two is the tawaf. Number three is the sa'i. And number four is the shaving of the head or the trimming of the hair. The first of them, which is the ihram, has two meanings. It's a dual meaning. So normally when people say the ihram, people just assume that it means the clothing, but actually there is a double meaning to the word ihram. One refers to the intention and the state, and the other then refers to things like the clothing, because it's more than the clothing, and that's basically the restrictions of ihram, and inshallah we'll speak about both of them. The ihram therefore has a dual meaning. The primary meaning of the ihram is the intention and the state that you enter into by making that intention. So when you come to the miqat or a point adjacent to the miqat, you will say the talbiyah, and before the talbiyah, you will make the intention of the pilgrimage that you're going to offer, because the intention will differ between Umrah and Hajj. So because this is the fiqh of Umrah, and then inshallah there's another session for the fiqh of Hajj, we're going to focus just on the Umrah. So when you're performing Umrah, you will say Allahumma labbaika Umrah or labbaik Allahumma Umrah. It is the same thing. And that is basically the intention that you make to enter into the state of Ihram. Now, before you enter into that state, you have to be ready to enter into the state. And that basically means that for both brothers and sisters, men and women, there are certain things that you have to do in order to be ready in that state. Number one of them, and perhaps the most important of them, is to be in a state of ritual purity. So, and what I mean by ritual purity is not necessarily wudu, although that is recommended, and to take a ghusl before you go into ihram, that's also recommended. But it means that you've trimmed your nails. It means that you've shaved the pubic area and underarm hairs. All of those things that you would normally do as part of the cleanliness that the Muslim has is something which you should doubly ensure is in place before entering into the state of ihram, so that you're ready to enter into the state. Once you make that intention, every single restriction of ihram then comes upon you. And that ihram intention isn't made before the miqat, it's not made after the miqat, it is made at the miqat. And the miqat, for those of you that aren't familiar with this term, are the points that surround the haram area. Depending on the direction of travel that you are coming in, there are the different points by which then you enter into the state of ihram. So these are almost like the checkpoints. Depending on the direction, there are different checkpoints. Some of them are further away from Mecca, some are closer to Mecca. The furthest of them, out of all of them, is actually the one in Medina, which is called Dhul Hulayfa. And Dhul Hulayfa is actually today part of Medina, although in the time of the Prophet ﷺ would have been on the outskirts of Medina. But today, because of how the city has grown, it is actually an area in Medina itself, but it's towards the very edge of Medina. So when you get to, for example, when we get to Miqat, and because we're going on the train, we won't actually be going to the Miqat, but we'll be on the train and we'll pass by a point adjacent to the Miqat. That is where you make the intention for the Umrah. And once you've made the intention, then it's also the Sunnah and highly recommended, and according actually to some scholars, an obligation to also make the Talbiyah. And the Talbiyah is to say, لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. And then to repeat that again and again up until you arrive in Mecca, and as you go to perform the Umrah, it is also highly recommended. Once you have made the intention, you now have entered into the state of Ihram. And therefore, that means that a number of things would have been done previously to allow you to enter into that state. The most common of them and the most famous of them is that you will be in the clothing of Ihram. But we're going to run through all of what are called the restrictions of Ihram, because that is therefore the second meaning now of the state of Ihram. So the first is the intention, and that is extremely important. The intention is something where you should be ready now to perform the Umrah in terms of your sincerity, in terms of your heart being cleansed and pure and ready to perform the Umrah with everything that it entails, from the tawaf to the sa'i to the du'as that you're going to make, the dhikr that you're going to recite, everything that basically your heart requires in order for it to be ready to make what is one of the greatest acts of worship, to perform one of the greatest acts of worship in Islam. All of that should be in place as you make the talbiyah. And that is why once you enter into that state, it is a state that is a sacred state. And that is why the people of the past, the scholars, the companions, and so on, once they were in the state of Ihram, they would use their time very wisely. Because even though you're actually, still a few hours away from Mecca, and maybe a good number of hours away before you even begin your Umrah, you're in that sacred state. So to use that time in dhikr, in dua, in the recitation of the Quran, and just to stay away from things that a person shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be gossiping, shouldn't be backbiting, shouldn't be using that time in an idle fashion. You're going to stand before Allah Azza wa Jal, visit His house, perform the tawaf and Umrah and everything else. It's not really becoming that you should spend that time idly before you actually get to what is the house of Allah Azza wa Jal in Mecca. But then there are physical things also that are part of that. That's the spiritual side. But the physical things are called the restrictions of Ihram. So once you enter into that state of Ihram by making the intention, there are a number of things that are impermissible. Some of those things are for both men and women. And some of those things are specific to men. And some of those things are specific to women. So we're going to run through all of them. I will begin with the ones that are for both men and women, and then we'll speak about the ones individually for men and individually for women. So, number one, the first thing that no one can do, male or female, is to remove any hair from the body. That includes your hair from your head. It includes for the brothers things like a beard and a mustache. It includes for everyone any type of bodily hair. So, any hair removal isn't allowed in the state of Ihram. And therefore, as you can imagine, for people that used to travel many decades and centuries ago, the journey from a miqat point from somewhere like Medina to Mecca would have taken a number of days. And the fact that you can't trim your hair, you can't trim your mustache, you can't remove your hair, there would be a level of growth that would come attached to that. And that the reason for that is because in the state of Ihram, one of the objectives of it is that you show a level of humility and humbleness before Allah Azza wa Jal. And that humility that is a spiritual state should also be manifested in a physical form. And that is why we dress as we dress in Ihram. And there are certain things that would normally be permissible. In fact, normally they would probably be recommended to trim your hair, trim your nails. Those things are generally just part of good upkeep. However, in the state of Ihram, you don't do so. And that's because when you stand before Allah Azza wa Jal in His house, making the tawaf and sa'i, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us a level of humbleness and humility that is befitting for the one that goes to see their master and their Lord and their creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any type of removal of hair is impermissible. Number two is removing nails, whether fingernails, toenails, any type of removal of nails is also impermissible. Number three, the use of perfume. And perfume, whether it's in any form, whether it be soap, whether it be shampoo, whether it be actual cologne and that type of perfume or oil, whether it be, for example, using scented wipes, anything that is perfumed and used for the purpose of perfume. It is actually used in the sense that people like themselves to smell good and well. There are some gray areas and some issues of difference of opinion. Most famously things like brushing your teeth, like toothpaste. The stronger opinion is that inshallah ta'ala that is allowed, because the primary purpose of brushing your teeth is more for the oral cleanliness and hygiene as opposed to the perfume. The mint is something which is additional. But if you can find, for example, toothpaste that doesn't have anything of a scent to it, then that would obviously be probably more preferable. So anything that is scented isn't permissible. That includes deodorant, all of those different things. Soap, hand wipes, all of this. If it doesn't have a scent or you find an unscented version of it, then it is permissible. However, even though it may be permissible strictly, remember again that Allah Azza wa Jalla wants to see a level of humbleness before you. I know that's something quite difficult for us sometimes to understand, that you wouldn't use perfume or you wouldn't do certain things, you just avoid them. For us, we're quite fortunate because avoiding literally means just a few hours. In the case of Umrah, most likely you'll leave in the day, and by the end of that day, you'll be done anyway. In the Hajj, obviously, it's going to be a slightly longer process. But remember that there is a reason for this, that there is a state that Allah Azza wa Jalla wants you to be in. And so just be mindful of that. But it is permissible to use anything that is unscented if it does the same job that you want it to do. Usually, when it comes to Ihram, the thing that most people forget and fall foul of in terms of restrictions is this one, perfume. It is the one that most people get caught up on, because you'll go into your hotel room and not even realize after you go to the bathroom that you wash your hands with soap, because you're just on autopilot. Or maybe you want a quick shower and you don't even remember that you're going to use shower gel. Or you were just in the bathroom and you quickly put on some perfume or use deodorant. Or, for example, you went to eat somewhere and they gave you scented wipes. I often say to people performing Hajj and Umrah, just because you're in the state of Ihram, don't assume that everyone around you is as well. So even though you're in Mecca, or you're on the way to Mecca, or you're on a train that goes to Mecca, don't think that the people working on the train or in a restaurant or even in the city of Mecca in some shop or some restaurant also are in the state of Ihram, or they won't care about your state of Ihram necessarily. They just give you what they give you and they do what they do. It's just their job. The hotels also don't just like put unscented things for you because you may be in a state of Ihram. It is just like every other place that you go to. So really the onus and responsibility is upon you and I to be mindful of that particular issue. Number four, the fourth restriction is anything to do with marriage. So it's not allowed for a person in the state of Ihram to get married, to propose, to be proposed to be a witness to a marriage contract. All of that is not permissible. And some of these things don't really apply anymore to us today because, again, of the way that we now travel and the way that we. But remember, in the olden days, some people would have been on the road for a month. And so for someone to get married during that purpose, or on their journey to find someone that they want to get married to, wouldn't be, completely out of the blue. So some of these restrictions may not apply so much to us, but they're there because obviously in different times and places they may apply. Number 5 and 6 is any type of marital intimacy, whether it's the things that lead up to the actual act of intercourse, anything that goes before it, or the actual act itself. Both of those, all of that is not allowed. So anything that raises a person's desires, anything that leads to intimacy, and intimacy itself, all of that is impermissible in the state of Ihram. And again, that would have been perhaps a bigger problem in the olden days, not so much now. But again, most of us or many of us are there with our spouses, our wives and husbands and so on. So it is just very reasonable for you to just be on guard and just be alert to that particular issue. And then also hunting, which again doesn't really apply to us, but hunting in the state of Ihram is also impermissible. So those are the general restrictions that apply both to men and women. For then men, there are specific things that they can't do. Number one is that they can't wear any item of clothing. So anything that resembles an item of clothing isn't permissible in the state of Ihram. And that is why men are literally in nothing except those two white sheets. So no undergarments, no vests, no underwear, no socks, no type of item of clothing is permissible for a man to wear. And therefore, men are literally in, as I said, in the upper robe and in that lower robe that most people could call ihram anyway. That's basically what the men are allowed to wear. In terms of footwear, they have to wear something like a sandal. And what I mean by that is, number one, it has to be below the ankle. And this is the position of the majority of the madhabs. It has to be below the ankle. It has to expose the heel and a part of the foot, like the toes and some of the rest of the foot. A part of the foot has to be exposed. So a normal sandal that most people are familiar with, but not a croc, because a croc actually covers the vast majority of the foot. So something like a sandal, a normal Clark sandal, or one of these other sandals that people get Merrell and so on, these types of sandals would be okay. The Hanafi madhab is the most strictest on this issue, because in addition to everything that I just said, they also want the top bone exposed. And the top bone is the bone that runs from the top of your foot, where your ankle starts, all the way down towards the end of your foot, towards the toes. And therefore, you usually find that the Hanafi scholars say that you have to therefore wear something like a flip-flop. And that's because most other sandals have straps, heel straps and straps on the top of the foot that will cover a part of that bone. And so because of that, therefore, the Hanafi madhab is the strictest of all of them concerning this issue. But otherwise, the general ruling still applies that you can't wear clothing items and your footwear has to be somewhat restricted. So no socks, no khuf, which is the leather sock, no shoes, no trainers. It is limited in that way. And number two, the other thing that men can't do is they can't cover their heads. So no headwear, no caps, no scarves, nothing that is attached to the head and covers it. That is impermissible for the men. For the women, the two things that are therefore restrictions to them, because for them, all clothing is permissible and all footwear is permissible. So they can wear their normal clothes, and then on top of that, they wear the outer garment, which is called the jilbab or the abaya, and the hijab, which is the scarf. That's what they wear. The two things that they can't wear is number one, the gloves, and number two is the niqab, which is the face veil. And if a woman wears the niqab usually and she wants to cover her face in the state of ihram, then the way that she would do that is that she would not have it attached to her head, because the niqab is the cloth that you tie behind the head, but rather she has a longer scarf that she drapes over the top of her head that would cover her face, and she only does that when there are men around, or men that obviously aren't mahram to her are around. But when she's just with women or she's with her close family members, her maharim, then she wouldn't do that either. Those are the restrictions of ihram. Depending on which restriction is broken, there are expiations, but I'm not going to spend too much time now going into that. But inshallah ta'ala, that's what we're there for. So if anyone is unsure or you think that you broke a restriction or whatever, come and speak to your religious guide, whether it's myself or someone else, and they will then tell you what to do next. It's not from the Sunnah also, just as a very quick point before we move on. There is no such thing in Islamic fiqh as a just-in-case fidya. And a just-in-case fidya is that someone basically just pays for two or three just in case. Like I'm probably gonna end up using perfume. I'm probably going to end up cutting my hair or removing some hair or whatever. So I'm just in case I'm going to give two or three just in case. And that kind of concept doesn't really exist in Islamic fiqh. If you break a restriction, you find out, and then you realize, and then you give the expiation. And if not, then there's nothing, inshallah ta'ala, to worry about or to be concerned about. Once you are in there for the state of ihram, you must observe these restrictions all the way until the end of your umrah. So this goes throughout. It goes throughout from the beginning to the end. So there's no such thing that once you start the tawaf, you can do some of this stuff because now you started. So this goes from the beginning, from the moment that you make that intention at the miqat, all the way until you finish trimming your hair or shaving your head. Once you're in the state of ihram, therefore, as I said, it is recommended that you perform or make the talbiyah as much as you can. You will arrive at Mecca. Most likely you will go to your hotel and freshen up and what have you. And then you will go to the haram in order to perform your umrah. The first thing that you will do as you go into the haram is you go towards the Kaaba and towards the black stone. For men, you uncover your right shoulder. It is the sunnah to uncover your right shoulder. And so you bare your right shoulder just for the tawaf. Not for anything else, but just for the tawaf. You make sure that you go to the black stone because that is the starting point of the tawaf. And as you come to the black stone, you say Allahu Akbar as you face the black stone and you point towards it. Most likely, I don't think anyone will really be able to go and kiss it or to touch it because of the crowds. So most likely you're pointing towards it. And pointing doesn't mean that you have to face it or turn towards it. The Kaaba is always on your left. You just simply raise your hand and you look towards it and then you carry on. And once you've said Allahu Akbar, your first round of tawaf or your first circuit of tawaf begins. You're moving in an anti-clockwise direction around the Kaaba and you will go around it 7 times. Each circuit begins and ends with the black stone. As you go around, it is the sunnah to make dua, to read Quran, to make dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal. You can make those du'as, by the way, in your own language. If you don't know the Arabic, you can read from a book if that's easier. But it's better to make du'as from the heart. Either way, you're going around. There is no specific du'a in the tawaf other than in the last part of the tawaf, which is the Yemeni corner, between the Yemeni corner and the black stone. The Kaaba, as you know, has 4 corners. So the black stone is in a corner. The corner before the black stone is called the Yemeni corner because it faces the direction of Yemen. And so between that little small part of, or that final part of the tawaf circuit, it is the sunnah to read رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And to keep repeating that until you get to the black stone. You say Allahu Akbar, point towards the black stone, and then now you begin your second circuit. And you will do this 7 times. On the 7th circuit, ensure that you finish the tawaf correctly, meaning that you pass the black stone. You don't just get close to it and run away. Make sure you pass the black stone, and you have now completed the 7 circuits of tawaf. A tawaf is 7 circuits, whether it's an obligatory tawaf, whether it's a sunnah tawaf or an optional tawaf. So even if you just want to go back later on and do optional tawafs while you're in Mecca, every tawaf must consist of 7 circuits. The misunderstanding that some people have that if you go around once, that's called a tawaf. No, that is called a shawt. It's called a circuit of tawaf. A tawaf is 7 of those. So that's what you do. Once you've done that, for the brothers, make sure that you cover your shoulder. And by the way, it's also the sunnah for men in the first 3 circuits of tawaf to jog lightly. However, again, because of the crowds, usually that is something difficult to do. But if you can, it is the sunnah also to do that. Once you've, but the right shoulder remains bare for all 7. But the jogging is done for the first 3. Once you've done all of those 7 circuits, the men cover their shoulders again and they pray 2 rak'ahs behind Maqam Ibrahim. And it's the sunnah when you get to Maqam Ibrahim to recite the verse وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى, which is the verse in which Allah Azza wa Jal tells us to pray at the Maqam Ibrahim. The Maqam Ibrahim is that place where the stone is contained, the stone that was used, or the rock that was used by Ibrahim alayhi salam as he and his son Ismail were building the Kaaba. And the Maqam Ibrahim traditionally, historically, was actually by the Kaaba because now it's actually removed further back, right? And you're probably thinking, how is he building the Kaaba from like way over there, right? The Kaaba is like miles away. The reason for that was because it was actually by the Kaaba, but Umar radiallahu anhu asked that it be removed because of the number of crowds of people that were trying to pray there and people making tawaf. And by the way, that's still an issue because people are still trying to make tawaf and people are trying to pray there. And usually it is a very congested place, very difficult to pray there. So anywhere in that whole area, it's permissible for you to pray. Don't, if it's busy and congested, don't fight people, don't get in the way, don't obstruct people trying to make tawaf. Find a safe place out of the way and just perform your 2 sunnahs of Ibrahim or 2 sunnahs of tawaf. And those 2 rak'ahs are sunnah rak'ahs. In the first one is recommended after Fatiha to read Surah Al-Kafirun. In the second one, after Fatiha to read Surah Al-Ikhlas. After those 2 rak'ahs, it is then also the sunnah that you drink from Zamzam. And you pour some of it over your face and your head if you can do so. And there are many taps and sinks around that area, by the way. Those small containers, but actually sinks as well, where you can actually go and drink from Zamzam and pour it over your head. Once you've done that, you now go towards the sa'i. The only other thing to remember also about the tawaf before I forget is that you must be in a state of wudu. So wudu is an obligation and a condition, according to the vast majority of the scholars, for the correctness of the tawaf. So you have to be in a state of wudu. Once you've left and you've gone towards the sa'i area, which is now the third component. So we had the ihram, we had the tawaf, now we're going for the sa'i. In the sa'i, you don't bare your shoulder for the men or anything else, but you will begin from the mount of as-Safa. As-Safa is the one that is closest to the direction of the Kaaba. So it's the one that is closest to as you come out of the tawaf area and you go towards the mas'a or the area of a sa'i. When you come there the first time, it is recommended that you recite the verse, and all of this, by the way, will be in your Umrah guides, and all the du'as will be written there. Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'irillah, that verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. And then it is the sunnah that you make dua. There is a dua that is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ that you read 3 times. And in between each of those 3 times, it is the sunnah that you make your own du'as. So there is a prescribed supplication from the sunnah that you're going to read 3 times, but in between, so twice, because in between those 3, you're going to make your own dua. So the sunnah is that you read the prescribed one, and then you make your own du'as as much as you want. Then you read it a second time, and again make du'as as much as you want. And then, so you're facing the Qibla, you're facing the Kaaba, you're raising your hands, and you're doing this. Once you've done this 3 times, now you will walk towards the next mount, which is Marwa. And as you walk, you will see that there is a section that is highlighted green. There's like green lights above you. That area, it is recommended for the men that they jog. They jog lightly from one end to the other. Now, if you're with someone, for example, an elderly person or a woman or someone that doesn't have to jog, you can still jog and just wait for them to catch up as they walk to you. So it is the sunnah to jog for men. Once you have gone to the other side, and again, there is no prescribed dua in the sa'i, but it's a time for dua and for dhikr and for the recitation of the Quran. And again, you can make du'as in your own language if that is easier for you and so on. Once you arrive at Marwa, you will again read those 3 du'as in the same way, the 3 prescribed supplications, and in between, you will make dua for yourself. And once you've done that, that is now 1 circuit. So from going to Safa to Marwa, that is considered to be 1 circuit. So each mount that you reach is considered to be 1 second. I say mount, by the way, but today it's not really a mountain anymore. It's just an area that you see. There's not really, the mountain doesn't really exist. And even the part of the mountain that does exist is now shielded off just to keep it preserved. So it's not really a mountain anymore, but traditionally would have been a small hill or a mount. And so they're still called the mounts. So when you get to Marwa, that is 1 second. You will read the same supplications there, and then you will go back to Safa. That is now your second second. Back to Marwa is three. So you should start at Safa, and if you've counted correctly, by the end of the seventh circuit, you will have ended at Marwa. So you will begin at Safa, you will end at Marwa. It is therefore, something which you just have to keep count of, right? Remember where you are, like with the tawaf as well. If at any point you're uncertain in the tawaf or the sa'i in terms of what number you're on, you always base it upon what is the minimum certain number. So always go with the minimum. If you're unsure, is it the third circuit of tawaf, the fourth one? What is your third? Always base it on the minimum just to be sure and be accurate. Once you arrive at Marwa after the seventh circuit of Sa'i is done, the Sa'i is now complete. And once you've done the seventh circuit of Sa'i, all that remains for you, for your tawaf, or for your Umrah rather, is for you to trim your hair or to shave your head. Now, for the men, they have the choice between the two. They can either shave their head or they can trim their hair. To shave the head is more virtuous and there is 3 times more reward. However, based upon your dates, I'm not quite sure again of everyone's itinerary, but some people may literally just be there like a day or 2 days or 3 days before the Hajj. And so maybe some people will be like, if I shave my head, it's not really going to grow back for the Hajj and so on. In which case, if you want to trim for the Umrah and save the shaving for the Hajj, which is obviously more virtuous because it's the pillar and the bigger act of worship, then that's also okay. And if you want to shave for both, it's okay. And by the way, you don't need a great deal of hair to grow back in order for it to be considered to be shavable. So, some people are bald, they still have to shave their head, right? So the hair in and of itself isn't really the issue here. It is about the act of shaving. Hair, lots of it, small amounts, bald, not bald, that is like a slightly different issue. Or you can trim your hair, in which case you would trim equally from around the head. So it's not just that you're trimming a part or you're just shaving a part or something. Whatever you do, you would do equally from around the hair. And obviously, the barbers of Mecca that you will go to and visit are experts in this game, right? This is what they do day in, day out, and they've been doing it for years. So they pretty much know what to do. You can choose whether you want to do that with scissors, you want to do that with a machine, you want to get it shaved. Shaving, by the way, means with a blade. So if you get a number one or a number two, that's still a trim from an Islamic fiqh point of view, I mean, right? Not like a stylish point of view, a fiqh point of view. So a fiqh point of view, you need a blade. The blade has to run over the head in order for it to be considered to be a shave, and that is where there is more reward. Once you have completed that, then for the men, they are not out of the state of ihram. For sisters, for women, what they will do is they will take the ends of their hair, the bunch of their hair, they will bunch it up at its ends, and they will take off a fingertips length. So you grab all of the hair together and you take off just that much, just the trimming. Obviously, there is no shaving for women. They just take off that much. That's all that they need to do. And therefore, they don't need, obviously, a barber or a hairdresser. They can do that themselves. They can ask another sister to do it. They can ask their male companions or whoever's traveling with them to do it. It's fairly simple for them to do. They can do that, inshallah, in their hotel room. So once that is done for the men and the women, brothers and sisters, then now your Umrah is complete. And now you are outside of the state of Ihram. The state of Ihram finishes, and therefore everything that was previously a restriction now becomes halal once again, obviously until we will inshallah make the intention for the Hajj. And so the restrictions of Ihram apply, they're the same for both Hajj and Umrah. But obviously after you finish each one of the acts of worship or each one of these major rites, and the Hajj one is slightly different, but inshallah we will speak about that in more detail, inshallah ta'ala, when you come to that session, bi'idhnillah. So that is like a brief overview, as I said. Inshallah, you will see. I'm sure that there's going to be a number of questions, but at the same time, inshallah, we'll also run over this in more detail, inshallah, once we get to Saudi Arabia, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for that insightful reminder on how to do your Umrah. Inshallah, we'll take some questions now. If anyone wants to ask a question live, they can raise their hand. Also, pop a question or questions into the chat, and inshallah, we'll take a few questions. Okay, so we have one question here. I wanted to ask if we could do Hajj Qiran instead, if we wish, due to the timeline being very tight. I assume as one of the groups are arriving on the 24th and they'll be leaving for Mina on the 25th. In that case, how does this initial Umrah differ?
Okay, so For those of you, so the description that I just gave is probably going to apply to the majority, and that would be the tamattu hajj. So if you've heard of people saying hajj tamattu is where you make an ihram for umrah, you do the umrah, you complete it, you finish your ihram, you come out of ihram, and then for the hajj you go into a new ihram. That is called tamattu, and that is what I think the majority of people will do. And it is the one, frankly, that the Prophet ﷺ advised, because he told the vast majority of his companions that that's what they should do. They should do tamattu in his farewell hajj. The other type, there are two other types of Hajj. The one that the sister is asking about is a Qiran Hajj. And the Qiran is when you combine the two in a single ihram. The difference between the two is that if you go for the Qiran Hajj, once you enter into the state of ihram, so you will do the same thing in terms of making ihram at the miqat in Medina, traveling to Mecca, and so on. You are now combined to ihram, so you cannot come out of the ihram, the state of ihram, until the Hajj, the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, the day of Eid, when people start coming out of the ihram for the Hajj. So you're going to stay in ihram all the way through. That's the first major difference. The second major difference that also takes place is then in terms of the actions of because it's combined, the acts of tawaf and sa'i, it is the sunnah for you to make a tawaf. Sunnah for you to make a tawaf, but that isn't the tawaf of Hajj anymore, nor is it the tawaf of Umrah, it is a sunnah tawaf. But it is recommended for you to do so. Once you have done that, if you then do the sa'i after that, that will count also. If you have the intention that it's a sa'i for Hajj, it will count for that as well. So you can either just do the tawaf by itself, just a sunnah tawaf, and then you leave the tawaf and sa'i until the Hajj one. So you're really only doing the tawaf twice and the sa'i once. Or you can do the sa'i with the tawaf of the umrah with the intention that this is going to count for my sa'i of Hajj, and then it will count for that. And therefore, on the 10th, you only have to do the tawaf and you don't have to do the sa'i. That is the major change between them. For both the tamattu and qiran, you still have to give a sacrifice, so the slaughter is still due. But those are basically the major changes. But again, if someone really wants to do that, maybe come and speak to us individually so that we don't confuse the rest of the group, inshallah ta'ala.
Very Sheikh. Let's go to Brother Hashim. You've raised your hand. You can ask your question to the Sheikh. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Just a quick question with the Safa Marwa. Do you have to keep your wudu for Safa Marwa? If you break wudu
No.
during Safa Marwa, do you need to renew?
No, you don't. So no, you don't. So I mentioned it for the tawaf because it's a condition for the tawaf, but for the sa'i, it's not a condition. So for the sa'i, therefore, if you don't have wudu or you break your wudu in the middle of sa'i, it's recommended to have wudu, but it's not a condition.
Okay, Jazakallah khair.
Go to Sister Saba. You can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Just a quick question. You mentioned about the two types of Hajj. Is there another type where you enter the Ihram from Medina and then you do an Umrah and then with the same Ihram you do the Hajj?
Yeah, so that's also Qiran. So you're not doing an Umrah, you get the reward of both. So if you did, for example, the tawaf and the sa'i, and then you can still repeat the tawaf and the sa'i for Hajj as well. So you're getting the reward of both Umrah and Hajj, but you're not going to come out of the state of Ihram. Right? So that's the difference between them. You're just staying in Ihram all the way through. But you get the reward for both. So it cancels both.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Okay. Can men and women wear eye masks in Ihram?
Okay, can men and women wear eye masks? And I suppose similar to that is also face masks in Ihram. For men, it is easier for them to wear it because the restriction for men in Ihram is to cover their head and not the face. For women, it is more problematic because the restriction for them is to cover the face because they cover the head anyway. So the face is actually what they're not allowed to do. Therefore, my advice for both, because even for men, there is actually differences of opinion. For both is that unless you need it, like for a medical reason or something, I would avoid it. For men, though, it is, I think, an easier issue. For women, I would say, unless it is really a dire medical need, then I would simply just stay away from it, just so that you're outside this gray area that the scholars are differing over. So remember, in the olden days, face masks weren't an issue. Eye masks didn't exist. So this is why we don't have very clear, indications from past scholars and madhabs and so on. It is a relatively recent issue, and obviously since COVID, even more of a recent issue. And so therefore, COVID had a very specific reason behind it, where there was a medical need. And so if that's not really the need there, especially, for most people, then I would say it is best to avoid it. And that's because there is this difference of opinion amongst the scholars, and Allah knows best.
So, when we're making our intention for Hajj, do we need to make it clear which Hajj we are doing?
No, it is so the intention differs because if you have made the Umrah and the Hajj separately, then the intention will for the Umrah is for the Umrah, and for the Hajj is for the Hajj. And if you're making Qiran, you will combine the two intentions. So you say Labbaik Allahumma Hajjan wa Umrah. So you mention both together. So it differs depending on what you're doing. And so it will become clear anyway. So depending on what you are doing, you will have to make the intention according to that particular rite of Hajj.
Okay. Are males allowed to wear footwear during Safa Marwa?
Yes, so for both tawaf and sa'i, you can actually keep your footwear on, obviously, as long as the footwear doesn't have any impurity on it. So as long as there's no impurity on it, then obviously to wear that, and you'll see a number of people doing that in the tawaf and in the sa'i. The tawaf, especially on the ground floor, people don't like others wearing footwear, understandably, because you're very close to the Kaaba and so on. And so if you do it, you'll find people maybe saying stuff to you or whatever. So just be mindful of that. But in terms of a fiqhi position, it is permissible. So there's nothing wrong with it from a fiqh perspective. And likewise for the sa'i, there is nothing wrong for it. So if that's something which you wish to do, then yeah, it is permissible.
Okay. Can we use muscle rub or tiger balm during Ihram?
Yeah, so usually like these types of ointments aren't perfumed, they're not scented. I mean, usually they smell quite bad from what I recall. So no one really uses them for their perfume properties, and therefore it's permissible. So yeah, stuff like that, inshallah, should be okay. But just always just double check if, because sometimes I'm sure there's a version that someone's brought out that is going to be perfumed. So just always keep that in mind.
Are the brothers allowed to use an umbrella?
Yes, so anything that covers your head that isn't attached to it directly is permissible. Like an umbrella, like, for example, I don't know, a roof, like a canopy, like a shade, like anything that, as long as it's not attached to the head. So what you see sometimes where people have like that contraption that's an umbrella, but it is attached to the head. It's like a thing that they wear on their head and it's like an umbrella. That wouldn't be permissible because it is attached now. But if you're just holding an umbrella in your hand or something like that, then yeah, that would be permissible.
After Umrah, will we be taken to the miqat again to do intention for Hajj?
No. So once you are in Mecca, your Hajj intention is done from your hotel or from your place of residence, wherever you're going to be. So whether you're in the hotel in Mecca or for those that are in Azizi or someplace else in Mecca, the Hajj intention is done from that place. So no, you don't need to go to the miqat again.
Hey. Can I wear Crocs, but it has a face of an animal on it?
Um, are we talking about brothers or sisters here?
Women.
So women, yes. So women, as you said, can wear any type of footwear. So trainers, shoes, whatever else, Crocs, all of that is okay. Faces should generally in clothing be avoided anyway. So whether that be, on footwear or whether that be on clothing, it should be avoided. And therefore, if Crocs have it, just like cover it, or maybe take off the face. Just like remove it. Inshallah, it'll be fine.
Okay, there is a question. Will the group be doing a group Umrah? Inshallah, when it comes to the groups when they all arrive in Makkah, you will have the chance to do with your religious guide for your specific group. So inshallah, yes, you will have a group Umrah together. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? I think that looks like it's that. Okay. Okay, Brother Khalid, you can ask your question.
Hi, just a really quick one. In relation to Kurbani, how does that work? Is that during the Umrah stage or is that later on?
Are you asking from a fiqh point of view or a practical point of view?
A practical point of view.
So inshallah, the Qurbani, how it works is, of course, it's done during the Hajj days. But in terms of, for example, if we were going to organize it, inshallah, we'll be taking payment in Medina if you want to do it through us. And inshallah, that's pretty much how it's done. And we'll share more details with you closer to the time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for the Q&A. Inshallah, just a few reminders. We have a seminar on the 3rd of May, inshallah, and we strongly recommend everyone to come if possible. The only reason we say this is because, of course, we want to get you as prepared as possible for Hajj. And when it comes to the seminar, you want to know who you're traveling with your group. Really, you're just getting more familiar with the whole process. And I think it will really, really help. So everyone should have received an email where they could register their attendance. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and register your attendance if you haven't done that, as it'll be really, really beneficial. Secondly, we also have a webinar this Wednesday. Inshallah, it'll be more like a debate on what are the most important aspects of Hajj. So it'll be really, really interesting, and I think everyone should attend if it's possible. And then building up to Saturday, inshallah, it'll be package-specific webinars. So I think that will be an opportunity for everyone to view the itineraries in detail. It'll be specific ones for each group. The timings haven't been set yet. So inshallah, just over the next few days, we'll have all of that put up on Telegram. So make sure to join those. I think it'll be really, really important. But I think that's all. If anyone has any other questions, please let me know. I'll just go through the Q&A one more time to see if there's any more questions for the Sheikh. Sheikh, is it permissible to wash your ihram with detergent or only water?
So it's if it's going to be something where the scent lasts for a long time, then it's probably best avoided. But if it's something like most detergents, like you wash it and then within a day or two, like it's not really going to have a strong lingering smell, then inshallah it's permissible.
Do women have to cover their feet in Umrah?
Yes, according to the majority of madhabs, the feet have to be covered. Yes.
Inshallah, that should be everything. I see a question about your Hajj visa. You have not received it yet. I think it's nothing to worry about. Inshallah, give it a little bit of time. We still know there's a large number of people that have not received their visas. Nothing to worry about. Of course, we're keeping track of it, and if it's a situation where we need to fast track it or anything like this, we'll try our best to do so. But for now, nothing to panic about, inshallah. Sheikh, can you apply deodorant before you enter the state of ihram?
Yes, so before ihram, you can perfume yourself and apply deodorant. In fact, this is the sunnah for men to do so because the Prophet ﷺ did that before he entered into the state of ihram, so long as you don't apply it to the clothing. So just make sure that you're not wearing your ihram and then you start applying lots of perfume because some of that will obviously then fall onto your ihram. You can apply it to your body and hair and so on before you enter. And then once you wear the clothing, then even if some of that touches it, it's okay.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's all for today. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for attending. Hopefully, we'll be able to see you all on Wednesday, inshallah, for the next webinar. And on that, inshallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.